Christian Parenting.
Hi, Grace. Welcome to the Christian Parenting Podcast.
Hi, Stephanie. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm thrilled to have you here. Let's just jump right in to getting to know you. Can you tell a little bit about yourself and what you do, all the things?
Yeah. Well, one, yes, I also love that we have New Orleans connection, which is really
Yes.
cool. But I grew up in South Louisiana, right outside New Orleans. I now live in Atlanta. I had just moved to Atlanta after living in Orlando for a little bit. I went to Baylor University though, before all that, studied journalism. That was where I reconnected with Christ later on. Definitely went to the party scene, which at Baylor, you're like, really? There's Baptist to party? I'm like, at any college, you can find kids doing keg stands and doing shots they should not be doing. And reconnected with my faith my sophomore year, and just also writing has always been my love language with God, whether it's journaling, which I know you know a lot about, whether it's writing my prayers down, and especially writing in general for a younger generation has always been something I've enjoyed. And then I worked at a church for a little bit, but then I started writing on my own books. And even on my Instagram, I write these things called mini books, which are just little devotionals, especially for college and young adult women. For any age. And so, especially for the mothers of college girls or high school girls or young adults, that's something I love to do, is to connect, but also be relatable in it, to kind of sit with them in their emotions, but then always bring up scripture and an easy to read format. And so that's how I also write my books. And so it's been a joy. I travel to a lot of whether sororities or high schools. I go to some different high schools every year, different conferences, and I speak a lot, but it's just a joy to, I'm sure you relate to this, be who you needed when you were younger. And every parent is that for their kid. You get to be who you needed when you were younger. And that's been my calling.
Yeah, I love that so much. We do share a very similar story. And I went into ministry also because I had wanted someone when I was in high school to be mentoring me and guiding me a little bit. And I didn't have that. And then also I was like, I wish I could do that for other people. So I went into youth ministry for a little bit as well.
Yeah. Whoa, look at us. Girls ministers.
Yeah, I know there aren't that
Tried
many
silly
of us.
games like Oreos on faces, all the weird cringy stuff, but it was so fun. It was a fun season.
Well, it's funny now because I'll tell my kids, I'm like, I was a youth pastor, right? I did the fun things. I was fun. People liked me. And they're like, no.
Yeah. Yeah, kids will humble you. Even I now lead just for my own, I at my church, I lead a 6th grade Bible study, and they're so cute and they're so fun. And I think they like me sometimes, most of the time. But
you never
even
know
though
I'm
I'm trying to all be cool. I'm I can go to Alabama Zeta and be fine. But then when I'm with these 6th graders, I'm like, I swear I'm really cool. What can I do to convince you? It's so funny.
Yeah, they're intimidating.
So intimidating.
Yeah, for sure. Okay. Well, we're going to talk a little bit more about them as we go, I'm sure. But we're going to talk mostly about friendship today. And it's funny because I didn't realize I would think about friendships so much when I became a parent. But I feel like I'm always helping my kids be good friends and talking to them about what that looks like, and helping them work through fights, and worrying if they have friends and are they the right friends. And then I have to work on my own relationships, my own friendships, which turns out is also hard in this stage of life. So it's a lot. So I'm grateful that you're here to talk about friendships and give us some fresh insight when it comes to this topic. I think you share so vulnerably about your own friendships and your relationships, and I just love your honesty. So tell us a little bit about your experience and what led you to really want to write about this topic.
Yeah, honestly, and I feel like there were a lot of friendship books, but there was nothing. I felt a lot of bitterness in my friendship because I was always holding records of wrongs. I felt like I was always the better friend. I felt like I was always trying more. And the truth is, that was a very narrow mindset where, I'd go on social media, I'd be hanging out without me. Oh, I always invite them. This is so stupid. And I was a grown adult. And yes, I did this when I was 16. But then you can be a 16-year-old telling these girls in youth group, do not overthink, don't do this. And then you can go on Facebook and you can still do the same thing. And so I felt like I was a better friend. I felt like I had a lot of shallow and one-sided friendships. And I was like, I wanted to be the next level. And I had to let go of that bitterness and focus on being a better friend, being content when I was the better friend, and realizing, hey, if I'm trying more, Romans says we should outdo each other in love. I don't need to keep a scoreboard. Love holds no records of wrongs. It does not matter if I'm doing more. I would rather be the one who's living up the gospel. That is Christ in me when I show up more. It doesn't need to feel pathetic. I think that's also a real thing where you're I feel like a loser. I feel pathetic even as a grown adult when I try harder. I'm I would rather people see me as someone who really goes all out in my friendships. And then I also had to realize, okay, I'm called as a Christian to love radically, yet I'm also called to trust wisely. So how in my life, when I consistently get hurt, can I guard my heart in a way that reflects the Holy Spirit, where I can still unreasonably love people and unreasonably give grace, but I also don't give excuses to people who are belittling me or consistently not thinking of me. And so it was very much holding those two things together and realizing I can do both. Like, I can still be that radically loving person who's the better friend while also trusting and using discernment who God has for me.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. I love that. And I think it kind of touches on one of your points that community is created, not just found, because it's so easy to be friends with people who are just like around us, even though they might not be the best friends for us. They might not be pouring into us. They might not be giving us enough. It just might not be the wisest relationship, but it's like the most convenient. And there's a space for convenient friends. It's just you have to, like, what level are they at? You know, how much are you letting them into your life? They probably shouldn't be like your primary relationship. So, but I think it's really hard to know, okay, how to first to understand that, and then to find those people and like be intentional in building relationships. It's definitely a skill that's learned, because like you were saying, like you could do that at 16 and you still have to do it as an adult too. You know, like it's a constant battle, I think, in our flesh. So how can we help as moms? Like, how can moms help their daughters to just be intentional in building solid friendships that are going to build up their faith, build up their confidence, and just serve them well?
I think especially the desire for a clique starts when we're really young. Like, you want to have like a group of a sleepover, the VIP sleepover. Like, I remember you want to have a group, you have a lunch table. Cliques are so easy, especially as your childhood, because you do things where it's a group project. You do things where it's a lunch table. You do things where it's a sleepover. There is a limit of how many people you can invite. However, community is always going to be greater if you seek community and not a clique. And even as like we get older, there's nothing wrong with having a group of people that you're close to, that you all invite each other. But would have groups of people, but they were never better than to sit with someone else too. And I think it's about creating that mindset with your young daughters and be like, hey, yes, I know these are your 4 best friends, but how are you individually growing with them? Like, not just together. Like, how are you getting one-on-one time with each other and not holding that against each other so that you can know each one's souls? And also, how are you making sure you're being inclusive even as a group? Like, and that's also a hard balance. Like, you know, you can't invite everyone to the homecoming group, you know, for the dinner beforehand, but you can be really kind to everyone at school. And there will probably also be one girl alone, and there's probably another room for one more seat. So you're never better than to do that. And I think it's about creating that mindset for your daughter to be like, hey, yes, it's great you have these 4 friends, but remember, like, you're called to everyone in your class. Like, God put you there for a reason. So don't ever think that these are the only 4 people you need. And I tell a lot of girls, especially when I speak to college girls, especially with young women and even young men, you're like, okay, you go to college, like, you're going to meet your bridesmaids. Like, who are your besties? Like, who are your 5 best friends? And I have this thing where I tell college girls, I'm like, yes, if you have a wedding, you have bridesmaids, but you also want a dance floor. Like, you're going to invite a lot of people to your wedding who are going to one day, like, see the covenant of your marriage. You're going to stand there and say, hey, I'll bless this. I'll pray for this. I'm witnessing this. And it's not just about having 4 best friends. Like, you should be a good friend to multiple people, and it's different levels where you may not trust them the same, like you said, but at the end of the day, you care about them. And yes, you have your best friends, but you also have people on the dance floor who care for you, celebrate you for a great moment, and would be there for you if you're struggling.
Yeah, the click thing is so hard. And the like inviting, like I just so remember being younger, and I still see it play out now. But like you can invite 2 friends to go do something, and then the like 4th that you usually hang out with feels really bad. And I feel like the more you communicate with everyone, the better all of that goes. Because when you try to hide like a hangout, that's when everyone's feelings starts to get hurt because it feels sneaky.
So every girl has like that moment where you thought you realized, what do you again? And then you watch them hang out with others. And social media makes it tougher for kids these days too.
Totally.
Because, you know, none of us didn't have to always see that. And now they have to see it constantly. Like, they feel lonely at school, and then they come home and they feel even lonely. And I also think it's so important as a parent that you remind them there's going to be so many avenues to meet best friends. And even in that day and age, like, if you don't have any in your class, like, look in your dance class, like, look in this. And I love that you said the convenient friends. Like, Aristotle describes, which he's obviously, this isn't like Christian text, and there's so much biblical friendship, but I think this is like a great mindset. We said there's 3 levels of friendships. There's friendships of pleasure, friendships of convenience, and friends of goodness. And I think even helping your daughter understand that, because it is so easy to get disappointed when someone in your class doesn't invite you. But when you realize, hey, you may not be at that level yet, that doesn't mean you'll never be at that level. But what can we do to make that friend from a convenient friend to friends of goodness? Like, let's pursue that friendship. And if they don't want to, that's okay. But we can say we tried and we're really kind. And so I think helping them when they're disappointed for not being invited and be like, hey, it's really not that big of a deal. They just don't know how great you are yet. And if they know, they would invite you. And if they don't want to, then it's their loss. And then it stops the disappointment and they get to have hope for the future instead of feeling disappointed in what they don't have today.
Yeah. Okay. Break down those 3 different friendships a little more.
Friendships of pleasure, which that's his first one. So that's like, okay, your workout class friend, or that might be like a friend, like you go to church with, but you don't actually hang out with. Like you have something that you enjoy doing together. If you're in college, it could be your friend you go to Kappa Sig with, but it doesn't mean it's great, like you go to the parties with. It could be one of those friends that are just, you do things that you enjoy together, but you don't have a deeper relationship than that. So it can sometimes be shallow. The second one is friends of convenience. And so that could be your coworker, your neighbor. That could be the girl. That could be even the girl in your dance class. It's convenient for her to talk to her before she dances across the floor. That could be a friendship of pleasure. But if she's just a girl dance class, it might feel more convenient. That could be the mom in the class too, the other PTA mom. That could be the teacher that you're trying to befriend because you want your daughter to hopefully do well this year. And then there's friends of goodness, the last one. And that's what we should all ultimately have the people that we trust be. And that's when we can trust wisely with these people. These are the people we care about. And friends of goodness are the ones who actually make your life better. They can start as a friend of pleasure. They can start as a friend of convenience, or they can just be a friend of goodness that comes out of nowhere. And those are the people that bring good to your life, and you receive good and you give good back. And so that's the ultimate goal of the people you can trust. And so, yes, you're also called to have all 3 of those. And it's good especially as a believer to have, especially non-believers and the friends of convenience and friends of pleasure, because you're living on mission for them. But the friends you're on mission with are the friends of goodness. And those are the ones that will make you better. And that also helps you be less disappointed. And so kind of writing down, I think it's so therapeutic and obviously don't let anyone see, but who are your friends of pleasure right now? Who are your friends of convenience? And who are your friends of goodness? And if you don't have that many in the friends of goodness, highlight the names that you pray over that you think from the other avenues could be friends of goodness. And even do that, with your daughter. You don't have to say, let's number them, but you could be let's think of the friends in your dance class. Let's think of the friends in your school. Okay, who do we want to invite this weekend? Who makes you feel better about yourself? Who's really kind to you? Who is someone you admire? And then be why don't we ask that girl to go to lunch? Why don't we go to the mall with that girl? Why don't we watch a movie night with that girl? Kind of showing them hey, this is what we're looking for in friends of goodness. It's these attributes. And yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like talking about it with our kids or even just doing that exercise on our own, I think could be really powerful. But I feel like what we're doing is giving them words to use for if they do get hurt. Cause I feel like sometimes our younger kids, especially, will treat maybe their friends of pleasure or convenience like a friend of goodness. And then something happens and then they're not aligned, something happens and their feelings are hurt. And you're well, maybe we need to take a step back and think, is this really the person that you're going to trust with all of your secrets and all of your feelings, and with the one person you're going to go to first? Or should she just be your, like you said, your dance class friend? And that's great. But you're giving them words,
Exactly. And it's easy because I think as a young girl, especially if you're growing up in the church and, as a parent, you're telling them, be kind, be kind. Sometimes the Christian girls get grace confused with excuses when it comes to friendship. We want to give grace. And so they're thinking, no, this girl that always talks about other people, but, who am I to judge? And then she ends up talking about her and she's her. And I'm you were giving her an excuse. You can still give grace and be hey, this is probably not an attribute I really want in a friend. I'm not going to excuse her sin. I'm going to walk away and try to find people better. I'm not going to also judge her for this, but I can give grace without giving excuses. And the Christian ones, as they're learning about God and forgiveness, kind of get those 2 things confused. And so sometimes they end up getting hurt the most because they're trying to be kind. They're trying to live it out. They're not overthinking the gossip or the little belittling comments to the other girl, but then it happens to them and then they're really hurt.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about conflict a little bit and some of the friendship issues that happen throughout all of our lives. What are some really practical ways that you can navigate conflicts in friendships with grace, but also with the reality of we have to set up a boundary here maybe?
Yeah. I think clarity, the Bible says God is not the author of confusion. He's the author of peace. And I think that is so true in our friendships, that we should be always seeking peace, which is clarity. Clarity will always lead us closer to Christ, to the truth. And so I think the importance of having conversation, like it's important to assume the best, but when you're jumping to conclusions to kind of show that friend, be like, hey, be like, hey, this is my human sin. This is kind of what I'm thinking. Like, can you speak into this right now to me? Cause I know this is like what I'm struggling with. I've totally had conversations with friends like that. I remember one time I saw a whole group text without me in college and I started spiraling. It was like, I was like high school again. They all hate me. Like, I was like, and I started bawling. I'm like a loser. I'm like, I'm crying on the bunk bed with my friend. And then I finally, usually the past me would have just been like, they hate me. I'm just going to like walk away and like hope that they're better. But I was like, I feel like I need to just talk about this. And I brought that to my friend. She was Grace. And she showed me a text. We're trying to plan you a surprise half birthday because your birthday's in the summer. We're going to do it on Mardi Gras because you miss New Orleans sometimes around then. And so
That's so
I was
sweet.
like, oh, I was like, I'm the worst. I let my past issues barf on these great people. But clarity helped me in that moment. When yes, I had tears. Yes, it wasn't the prettiest conversation, but I gave them a chance to speak into something of my insecurities. And so your insecurities will lie to you. And so it's important that you release them to friendships, that you confess them so that truth can enter your heart and so that they can encourage you. And there might be times when they're like, hey, actually we did, but it was because of this project. It was because of this. Or, we did go to the mall. It wasn't that offensive, but it gives you a chance to give them an opportunity to speak into that. And then also obviously assuming the best in our friendships with friends. And I did the wrong thing that moment. I jumped to the conclusion. Like jumping to prayer and discernment before conclusions will always be more healthy in your conflict in your friendship. And if you start jumping to conclusion, what will happen is you see group text without you. And then you're like, everyone's talking bad about my daughter. Everyone's doing this. Like they're all ganging up on me. They all have these after school plans. And then suddenly it was just one thing you saw and you've already written a whole narrative that isn't even true. And so it's so important when you're having conflict to decide, is this based on facts or is this based on feelings? And if it's based on feelings, like the Bible says, like, be careful about trusting your feelings. Trust the Lord, trust discernment, not your feelings. And there's a difference between that God gut and discernment than your feelings. And because your feelings often are your past hurts and everything that's happened to you. And also when it comes to conflict, remember you're allowed to walk away. I think sometimes, once again, even as the Christian moms, as, the Christian woman, we feel guilty. We want to help everyone. But if you've been hurt, sometimes the kindest thing you can do for both yourself and for that person to feel conviction is to give yourself space and to show that that is not something that you want in your everyday. And it doesn't make you a bully. It doesn't make you mean. You can still be super kind. You can still pray for that person, but you can also have a boundary that protects you and protects your family and protects your mindset.
I think that's convicting because I think clarity is something I'm still bad at. I don't want to have the conversations when I get hurt by a friend. I'm like, I'll just ignore that. Or maybe we're just not friends anymore.
Me
I've
too.
gotten
That's
better.
a woman thing. We're like,
oh my
peace,
gosh.
but that's not peace. We have to remember, that will never bring peace. Just ignoring issues.
I know. And I'm trying so hard to train my kids to do it better. One of my kids had some issues with friends and he went to school and he was like, I feel like this person doesn't want me my friend anymore. And I was asking the questions, why do you feel that? What are you going to do about this? And he gave me all the answers. And I was like, I think you just need to talk to him, as though that is the easiest thing to do in the world.
Yeah.
Just talk to him. You're fine. But he did. And it was fine.
To you and you're like, yeah, exactly. But
no,
it's easier
I
to
can
say
learn
than
from
do.
you.
100%.
Oh, always. It was definitely a parenting moment where it's do as I say, not as I do.
Yeah. So true.
But I can learn from it because it did end up going well. He was like, oh, we were just totally miscommunicating and we're great now. And they've been great friends since. I'm like, well, that was easy.
Yeah. You're like, okay, so I should try that with Brenda. Cool.
Yeah.
You're like,
cool.
Thanks for going first.
Yeah. You're a great model, kid. Thank you. You kind of touched on the insecurity a little bit. And I want to dig into that a little bit more too, because I think also that relates back to what I was just saying is it's out of insecurity. I'm not good at the clarity. It's not because I don't want to have the conversation or I really want to avoid conflict necessarily. Those things I'm fine at. It's the insecurity that gets in my way because I think insecurity is something that we battle with our entire lives in different ways. Sometimes more than others, it goes up and down a little bit. So how can we build up our confidence, our girls' confidence, so that we can handle relationships well and we don't seek approval in the wrong places and we can have a solid faith?
Yeah, I start especially, which once again, I'm saying this, I want to very much tell every parent here. It's very easy for me to tell you how to parent a kid. I don't have kids. And so I'm telling you from the mindset of what I hear them talk to me about and I have learned my experience. But for everyone listening to this, y'all are way more knowledgeable about parenting than me, but this is just my advice. And so if you care about it, but I want to affirm every mom here that being a mom is the hardest job ever that I have not had yet. I pray I get that job. And so, but when it comes to handling that insecurity, especially, and knowing your worth, I would encourage every parent to ask questions that point them to like their true purpose. And so be like, oh, how was your day today? Did you get a chance to be really kind to anyone today? Like, what did you do? Like, who did you talk to anyone who's not normally your friend? And did you like make them feel seen? You know, like we call God the God who sees us. How did you see people today? Like, how did you see people like him? Like the questions, because, and then obviously you're going to ask, how did that math test go? How did the class go? How do you feel? But asking questions too about their faith and how they're living it out will remind them, hey, this is my true purpose. So when they're insecure and they don't feel popular, they're like, but I am kind. Like, I may not be with that group of girls, but I am kind. Like, I may not be invited, but I did get a chance to talk to that girl who was all alone today. Like, affirm them in those things and also give them a safe place to talk about their feelings and the other things. But asking questions that also remind them of that importance will be so crucial, because once they start finding purpose in being the loving one and not wasting their time trying to prove they're worth loving, like then they have the purpose of being a Christian truly in their heart. And so it's a fight we all have to battle. Like, yes, am I being loving, or am I trying to waste my time trying to prove I'm worth loving? And so just constantly affirming them when they're being loving, and when they're exhausting themselves like every human being does in this world at some time, trying to prove that they're worth loving, just reminding them of their worth and be like, hey, I know you think that groups of girls is really cool and they have fun things, but I promise you, you will never have to beg to sit at a table that Jesus sends. Like, you will never have to beg to sit there. So why don't we think about other people? Like, I don't care about you being popular. I care about you being seen. And I don't think this group is seeing you. Like, and you deserve that. And just affirming them in those ways to remind them the goal is not popularity, success, or being the prettiest one. It's being someone who's kind and inclusive and sees others in the way that God sees them.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Am I spending my time being loving or chasing down, proving that I'm being loved?
Yeah.
That is just such a good question. And it just comes from a place of abundance instead of a place from lack. Like an abundance in our abundant amount of love that we receive from Christ, instead of a lack of friendship that we have from this, that we're trying so hard to get into, or whatever it is. I just think the idea of continually reinforcing our kids being a good friend and our kids representing Christ, and just leaning into that is going to serve them so much, because it's going to create them being a really good friend, so that people will want to be their friends and they can offer that to people.
So true. So true. And I love that you said that, because they can offer that to people, and remind them that even when they offer it and someone doesn't extend it back, they're like, well, at the end of the day, that happened to Jesus a lot, and you were kind. Like, you don't need to feel pathetic. I think because that's the real feeling of, well, I tried and she didn't like it. Okay, but were you kind? Like, were you nice? Was it inclusive? Then you don't need to feel ashamed about Jesus in you.
Yeah. So many, I think it's just our human nature to focus on ourselves, but we focus on ourselves in the wrong way. Like, we focus on ourselves in the, do people like me? Instead of, am I reflecting who God made me to be? And when we switch our mind to focus on ourselves in that way, in the God-honoring way, that is when we really come in to his purpose for us. And I love that you're really emphasizing that. I think that's really good. And we all need the reminder sometime.
For sure. Yes, so true.
Okay. Always, I kind of prepped you for this too, but to close up our time, I always like to kind of have just like a final reflection. And I just would love to hear your insight from working with so many girls and just talking to so many people about all of these things. What is one thing that you want every parent to know?
Well, especially when it comes to friendships, they're watching the way that you're being a friend to your friends too. So you may not realize, like, the phone call you're making with the friend, like if you're talking about your other friend in your group, like they hear more than you think. I always say, especially with girls with body image, like, I love my mother. She's amazing. But I still look at, when I hear her talk about her body, I don't think about her body. I think about mine. I think about, I get insecure, and it's not at all anything she means to do, but it's just like, they hear that and they're going to reflect that in their own heart. So I'd encourage the way that your friends, if they see you show up for your friends, if they see you celebrate them when they get something you don't have, if they see you love them well, they're going to want to be that same friend in return. Like, you're going to teach them by doing it.
I always try, and not to like show my kids, like, look what I'm doing, but I always try, like, when I am like making somebody a meal or get them a gift or write them a card, I always like try to point it out to my kids, just to be like, hey, this is how we love people. Like, if they're sick, or they just had a baby, or they're going through a hard time, or they just are really busy and life is chaotic, we can bring them a meal and we can show them love. and we can, like call them up, check in on them, just see how they're doing, all these things. I have a friend who lost her husband a year ago, and every Sunday I get a reminder on my phone to text her just to make sure I'm checking in case I hadn't that week. And my kids asked me about it, and I'm like, I just want to make sure I'm the best friend that I can be to her right now. And if that means I have to remind myself to do it, then I have to remind myself. So now they see the reminder and they're like, oh, hey, did you text her this week yet? Have you called her? And it's like, it's so important to model this. So I love that you bring that up, because modeling is the most important thing we do as parents.
And I think you think it might be selfish probably as a parent you think your whole life is now supposed to be your kids, I'm sure. Like that's a battle. Or your kids' friendships, focusing on being their social calendar. But remember that your social calendar is important too, because they're watching you prioritize that. And that means prioritizing your friendships and that social need that God has given each of us. And so don't feel guilty for doing that. And I love what you said. They're watching the way, you care for people that's the scripture. How are you caring for the widows, the orphans, and the poor in your area? Like they're watching how you care for your friends and they're going through a hard season. I still write thank you cards because my mom would write thank you cards and she would put that in my brain. And I laugh because my boyfriend's so amazing. He comes from a great family, but we were at his friend's house who owned a house in South Florida. So we got to have this beach weekend. I'm like, we need to go get them a gift. Like, and he's like, what? I never thought about that. I'm like, no, but they just let us stay at this nice house. And they're like, this is nice. He goes, that was so cool to do. And it's been a while. His mom totally does that stuff all the time. But it's interesting how you see it, it wakes you up. You're like, you don't have the idea until you see someone else do it.
Yeah, totally. And we get to be the first examples of that as parents, which is
so cool.
Amazing. Yeah, it's a gift. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on today and just sharing so much of your heart. I just find you to be so encouraging, and I'm really grateful that you took time to talk to us. Can you tell us where we can get your books, where we can connect with you so that people can just keep following along?
Yeah, that's so sweet. You can go to @Grace Valentine on Instagram. Especially if you have a high school or college age or even middle school daughter. I write a lot of encouragement consistently, devos, so it's an easy thing to send them. I love when the moms message me being like, I say the same thing, but she ain't listening. So thanks for this. And I'm like, I would love to just be another mother's voice saying the same thing in a different font. And then my newest book, The Better Friends, which is 12 truths. That's like a tongue twister every time I say 12 truths. 12 truths to shift from shallow and one-sided connections to vibrant friendships. And that is available March 11th. And if you're listening to this before March 11th, I have a pre-order giveaway for Get the Girls Trip Out the Group Text, $1,500 to Airbnb for someone who pre-orders. So you can check out my pin post for that. And that means you have to take your friend, not your family though. So this would be getting the moms. That's the one rule.
The girls trip.
Thank you so much. Yeah, girls trip out the group text. But thank you so much for having me. This is such a great podcast. I love what you do. And the fact that you do it first in your home and then you get to share with other people. That's the real calling we all have, to first love in our home.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that you get to speak to so many girls. I think you are right. You hit the nail on the head though. I can tell my kids so many things, and then somebody else will come in and speak to them and say the exact same thing, and they listen to it. So we need voices like yours to help us. So thank you for being faithful and doing it.
Thank you so much.
Christian parenting.